Bayhackle Sports presents the Delano Little Show.
Welcome to Bayhackle Sports, the Delano Little Show. We have a treat for you today. We have a father-son combination talking about the McGees. Dr. Jerry McGee, Ryan McGee, good to have you guys here.
Thank you so much.
And so many years officiating college football.
Yep.
We'll get into all the numbers a little bit later. And Ryan, senior sports writer for ESPN magazine. You do so many other things as well. We're going to get into that as well. Now, you're not our first father-son rodeo. It's a young show, but you're not our first. We had Donnie Shell and his son, Donnie Shell Jr. on, and Donnie Shell Jr. looked bigger than Donnie Shell Sr.
I can't
but
imagine.
he did not play football. Of course, Donnie Shell played for Pittsburgh Steelers.
Sure.
He said he just never kind of followed in that. Did you ever at any point want to follow your father and go into officiating, or that never occurred?
No, I loved it. That's how I learned football. But I tell you what happened was, growing up in Raleigh, and Dad was an ACC football official and worked North Carolina State scrimmages. Couldn't work the games because we lived in Raleigh. But very quickly, when I kind of had a run of the stadium, at Carter Finley Stadium, I was fascinated by the press box. And what I figured out was that, you know, these sports writers and TV reporters were getting paid to go to games, and no one was screaming at them. And so I'm like, you know what? I think that might be a credential might be the way I want to go.
That's awesome. That's a good way to look at it. You followed him for a long time. You saw a lot of things, and you knew writing was what you wanted to do. Is that how you got involved in it?
Yeah, honestly, I was fascinated by television. Like the TV. Like I followed where I grew up. I was a Tom Suter guy, right? The WRAL. I followed those guys around, and I was fascinated by, you know, covering it from a television perspective. And then the writing kind of came. I started as a TV producer, and my writing was my favorite part of producing features for ESPN. And so the magazine started, and they needed some help on some stuff, and I jumped in. And so, yeah, but yeah, I realized very early on there were 2 or 3 rows of people that were covering the games, and they got free food at halftime. Man, I got a hot dog and a barbecue sandwich, and you know, I was like a parking pass. I'm like, this feels like a good gig to me.
Yeah, it was a pretty good gig.
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah, yes. You know. Yeah,
I do know about it. Yeah, Dr. McGee. I mean, 404 college football games, 300 at Division I level. So, you start out in Greensboro, tiny Greensboro.
Yeah, sure did.
And you end your career in a national championship game.
Yeah.
I mean, the span of that must have been amazing, that whole run.
Well, it was. And I remember I worked a high school game on a Friday night. They had about 8,000 people at the game. And then I went on Saturday to Guilford to work my first college game. We had about 500 people. But it was, the great thing was, as I've told my boys, I could see, because some of these little country high school football stadiums around eastern North Carolina, you couldn't see because the lights were so dim, and you'd ask the times in the game when there would be a punt, you wouldn't even know where the ball was. But and then all of a sudden, these games were in the daytime in these beautiful stadiums, and you could see everything. It was a lot easier to be a referee there.
Yeah. Now most of your time spent with the SEC, correct?
I was in the ACC for a long time, and then when they started the Big East, they were officiating the 8 Big East schools: Army, Navy, Louisville, and Notre Dame. So I went there for a chance to work the Army-Navy game and a chance to go to Penn State and Notre Dame, places like that. So I was up there for 7 years, and then I came back and finished up with my buddies in the ACC, and for another 8-9 years.
All right, and you remember all this? You're there pretty much all of this time.
Yeah, I mean, I was sorry. The first game I had credentials for, media credentials, I was 12. Or I just turned 13. Dad had a game. It was North Carolina at Virginia. It was a huge football game. And I was there and had a camera that Santa Claus had brought me, and was on the sideline with the photographers from the Washington Post and from the Raleigh News and Observer, all those papers. And I'm on the sideline, and I got run over. Barry Word was a guy who played for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he was playing for Virginia, scored the game-winning touchdown, and one of the defenders that missed on the tackle hit me and blew me up. I might have weighed 80 pounds. And I thought everybody was like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "This is the greatest thing." But people, and again, everyone on the sideline is getting paid to be there. And so it was, I realized really early on, but I always tell everybody, I learned how to cuss in the 80s now, listening to Eddie Murphy stand up and listen to people yell at Dad, sitting in the chief seats. Because the families of the officials we got free tickets. They weren't the greatest tickets in the world. So we're with the townies, and they're the ones that are just screaming at the refs the whole game. And my brother and I had a routine. My brother's 3 years younger than me, and there would always be one guy in the section that thought it was his job to scream at the officials. And again, thought he was like a stand-up comedian. He got the crowd behind him and everything. And we'd give him about a quarter and a half where he'd get to feeling it. And then my brother and I would stand up, and I'd go, "Hey!" And everybody would look at us, and I'd say, "Quit yelling at my dad." And my brother would like droop his head, and that guy would shut up. Rest of the game.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So we admit it, but it was just a different way of learning football. And yeah, I wouldn't have traded for anything.
And you guys wrote about it, all got together in Sidelines and Bloodlines. Is that the name?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
I want to go back to you.
Yeah.
Because Dr. McGee, when you grow up, there's people say, "What do you want to be?" And somebody says, "Oh, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a football player, whatever." Yeah. Nobody really ever says, "I want to be a referee." I mean, we've heard that. How did that come about in your life? Tell me a little bit about your early life. And
Sure. Yeah, of course, I was active in high school sports at Rockingham High, just down the road, which is now Richmond Senior High.
Oh, yes.
But Bill Usler was one of the most important people in my life. He was my high school coach. And when I was a high school junior, he thought it'd be a good idea to start a junior high football program at the 4 local junior highs, so they would learn his offense and defense in junior high before he came to high school. So he made this big announcement: we're going to have 4 junior high football teams playing every Wednesday afternoon. And he threw me 4 striped shirts and said, "And you're in charge of the officials." So I had to go out and find people. We had one official for each game. We got $5 a game. And that's how I began my officiating career. And the pay got a little better over the years, but it was a little more intense scrutiny as well.
Right, okay. Now, you were an athlete too growing up.
Yeah, I played a little bit of football, a little bit of basketball, even ran in a track meet or two, but I was a baseball guy. I loved baseball from the time I was a kid, and I grew up in a baseball era where every little southern town had a textile league team or two. They all had a semi-pro team. Rockingham was fortunate we had a Negro League team that got to see the Kansas City Monarchs play and Birmingham Black Barons. So it was just a happy time for baseball people.
Right.
And so I grew up in that era and really loved the game.
Well, Richmond County, they're no secret. They put together some great programs over there. I've seen them when I covered high school football. Richmond County was always the Raiders. The Raiders were always.
That's right.
So that was a good area you came from.
It was the Rockingham Rockets when I came along, but it later became the Raiders. And it's funny because I graduated from high school a few years ago, but I still every Friday night I look for the football score to see how the local guys did.
Yeah, well, and you played sports too. You mentioned.
Yeah, I ran. I was a runner, and loved it. And I'm running their track meets, but then Friday night I'm going to see my high school play. And when I was in high school, and Saturday we're going with Dad to a game somewhere. And my job was I'm the family like audio visual nerd, right? I always loved television production. So I'm the VCR guy. So my job was to, whether I was at Dad's game or whether I was at home, my job is to make sure the game is recorded. Back in the JP days, right? Jefferson Pilot and Raycom, and Dad's got the noon game. And my job, if I was at the game, make sure the timer's set. And if I'm at home, I got to cut the commercials out. I sit there and watch the game and pause it, every time there's a commercial. Because
it's a big job, though.
But it's interesting learning football that way because I never played, but Dad would come home on a Saturday night or on a Sunday from, say he'd worked, Maryland, Penn State the day before. Well, Sunday afternoon, we're not watching NFL, we're watching Dad's game. And he's breaking it down. Why do you think I did this? And my brother's like, well, why did you call this on this play? Why didn't you call this on this play? And that's how I learned football. So then when I started covering football, I always felt like I watched the game a little bit different, almost like a coach's kid, right? I never played, but I learned the game sitting in the den. This is what this defense is, and this is why we called this or didn't call that. And it was kind of a different way to learn it.
You probably were just as smart as many coaches, I would imagine, because you saw the game differently.
No, the coaches wouldn't say that.
Well, I will say there were quite a few times when I would see something happen. I remember one really high-profile game I had where a team had run the football the entire length of the field, hadn't thrown a pass. First and goal at the 7 and threw 4 straight incomplete passes. Well, they lost by 2 points. and it was my fault they lost. And I'm thinking a little coaching would have helped along the way there, but they I always felt like those coaches were under a lot of pressure, and you work 365 days a year and you got 11 or 12 days to prove you know what you're doing.
Right.
And so I kind of understood what they were going through and tried to give them a break when I could in terms of just listening to them and let them vent if they needed to.
Well, I'm sure you got some interesting stories. We're going to hear some more coming up. We're going to take a break and back with the McGees here in just a second, okay? You good with that? You guys good? Delano Little Show will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Bay Hackle Sports, the Delano Little Show. We're talking with the McGees today, and good to have you here, a father-son combo. And Sam, your brother couldn't be here. I would love to hear what he has to say.
He's in a courtroom somewhere doing something really important.
Okay,
yeah.
I understand. Well, you did something really important for many, many years, calling football games, 404 of them to be exact, from what I've read out of your column. 404 games. Is anytime you ever thought, why am I doing this? Do I need to get out of this? Especially, I would imagine you took a lot of heat, just from, like you said, from everybody on the different sides, too.
Yeah, it's really funny because one of my high school teammates asked me a couple of years ago, he said, when you're out there and there are 90,000 people screaming and all, how do you really concentrate on your job? And I said, I never heard them. I didn't know they were there. There were 22 players and a handful of coaches and 7 officials, and nobody else existed. So, but I think sometime the travel really got to me. I had a pretty demanding job professionally, and maybe I'd have to get on a plane on Tuesday and fly to New York and raise money for a couple of days, and get home on Thursday and pack my bag Thursday night and get on an airplane on Friday and go to Notre Dame referee a football game, and get home Saturday night or midday Sunday, and back Monday you're back at it again. But some of the travel really became tiring. Almost exhausting, actually. And after about that 7th or 8th or 9th game of the year, you're thinking, man, this season's never going to end.
Right.
But and it got my last 20 years or so, they started sending us a lot further places. If North Carolina played at Oklahoma, all the officials were from the ACC. And if Oklahoma played at North Carolina, they all came from the Big 12. So we had to travel a lot more extensively. It wasn't just getting in the car and driving to Winston-Salem or driving to Durham or driving to Clemson. It was getting on airplanes and flying somewhere, and it could be anywhere from Ohio to Texas to New England. So that part was pretty exhausting.
Right, and you speak that you had a regular day job. I mean, 23 years as the president at Wingate, correct? Yep. And that's just amazing that you were able to do that and be able to be an official like you did. So.
Well, I had a board, obviously, that cooperated to let me do that. And I kind of had a break when I took the job at Wingate in 1992. I'd already signed a contract for that fall. And I felt an obligation to officiate that season. And so it went so well, the New York Times ran a story about me being the only college president who was a football official, and trustees kind of like that. Mm-hmm. And so they just keep doing it. Well, 16 years later, I was still out there, and I'll always be appreciative to our staff and the trustees for allowing me to follow my other interest.
Yeah, it was interesting that you talked about his conditioning in one of your articles, and I thought that was interesting I'll let you tell what you saw him doing all the time.
Oh, the neighbors thought he was crazy. He's running backwards. In the backyard, because you think about it. So Dad was always downfield. He was always side judge, field judge. So for folks who don't know, that's they're on the sideline. Primarily, it's pass interference. I mean, they're downfield the whole play. Well, you got to keep the play, in front of you. So you're running backwards and monitoring the play. So Dad's running backwards with kids that are a third of his age at the end of his career. And, these guys are running 4.6s and he's running backwards. Well, in the backyard, how do you get ready for that?
Got to run back.
Got to run backwards. The neighbors are like, is your dad okay? It's the middle of the summer and it's 95 degrees and Dad's running backwards in the backyard. But that's, but that's the part of it that I try to explain to not just football fans, but my colleagues in the press box. Explaining to them that, they all have day jobs, but they don't just show up on Saturday and work the game and, hope I got it right. they're watching film and they're having meetings and they're taking tests and they're going to clinics and they're running a time mile and that's the part that I saw. In the summertime, it's Dad taking my brother and I to the pool when we were little. We're in the pool playing and he's over there and he's got a highlighter and a pen and a rule book. And he's been, and on one night a week, he's meeting with other officials in there and they're watching film. And so, it's a year-long thing. And so what I always try to explain, and I've been stunned at like even my esteemed award-winning colleagues that have covered college football for decades, they don't get it. They don't understand. I have to explain to them, there's 3 teams on the field. And the third team that's on the field, the guys in black and white, they've worked really, really, really hard to get to where they are, particularly at the highest level. So that's the part I saw, is the preparation. We all know about the guys that lift the weights and the coaches that watch the film and all that, but the officials have also put in a lot of work.
Yes. And would you have any advice for anybody that's, let's say, younger and, growing up and thinking about getting into doing some officiating, and any advice for them?
Yeah, well, certainly we really need officials now. There's been a strong shortage of youth officials and high school officials for many years now because they're taking so much verbal abuse at those games that they're just walking away. So we need a lot of young people, men and women, to get involved in officiating. But my stance was always, if you want to move to the next level, become the very best at this level, and they'll notice you and you move up. And you don't officiate 2 years of high school football and then go to Notre Dame. It might be an 8 or 9 year pilgrimage, and
just like any other thing, right?
Then you start doing small college games. But it's I would like to see a lot more people, especially in North Carolina, get involved in officiating because of basketball, football, baseball, soccer. We need officials in all those areas. But it's a wonderful way to spend your free time. You make a few bucks and meet the world's nicest people. But there's a price to pay. I remember getting up and going to run at 6:30 in the morning, and my wife says, "Honey, do you know it's sleeting outside?" And I said, "Yes, it's going to be sleeting in Notre Dame in October too." And but there's a price to pay, but gosh, it's worth it. I wouldn't take anything from my years involved in football.
Yeah, you refereed for my head coach, Irk Russell at Georgia Southern.
One of the best ever.
Yeah, he's one of the best, and it just reminded me of that. You talk about, we were running down to the field to practice one day, and I was with my wide receiver friend. We were money sharp, and we were running down there, and Coach Russell was running down there too, a little slower. And we passed by him, and Money Sharp said, "Coach, it's raining. It's coming down in sheets out here." Like he's trying to get Coach to cancel practice. It was just storming, and he, he got that ball head, and that water's hitting that ball head, and he continues to run. And he said, "What did you say?" He's like, "Coach, it's coming down in sheets out here." And Coach Russell kept running. He says, "Then we'll practice as ghosts." I mean, that's that quick. I mean, I'm sure you met a lot of different coaches that have that kind of personality.
Oh yeah, and I don't care what you do in life. If you want to be the best, there's a price to pay. And Georgia Southern had the best Division I AA program for many, many years, as you know, and won national championships. But he paid the price and expected you to pay the price. And if you want to just be a college football official and work a few games, that's all great. But if you want to work the Orange Bowl, if you want to work the Rose Bowl, if you want to work the national championship, you got to put in the time. You got to do the extra kind of stuff. And I always found that when you got to those big games, the people who had invested the most were usually the people who were there.
What can we see in the book?
Well, it's stories. I mean, you talking about Irk Russell. I mean, so here's the best part of writing the book, Delano, was that I selfishly, I believed that I knew all the stories. I'd heard Dad telling the stories. I had been there in person for a lot of them, and a lot of the big games. And then, over the course of writing the book, and I'd have a lunch with Dad, and then I would have lunch with my brother, and then we'd all three have lunch together. And they would start telling stories that I had no idea. I'm like, I didn't know about that. So Dad, talking about Irk Russell, they worked a game at Georgia Southern, and they're having their meeting prior to the game and going over tendencies and look for this and look for that. And they realize that somebody is in the bathroom stall in the officials' locker room. And they realize it's Irk Russell. And so he comes out, oh, I'm sorry, guys. Well, he was totally spying on the officials. And then what I thought, what's he going to learn? I have no idea. So
That is awesome.
So the next time they come back, and sure enough, they're having their meeting, and they look, and there's the shoes underneath the stall. Coach Russell listened to him again. Well, they go to leave the locker room, and they have one of these deals. It's like almost like a storage closet. They just lock the door from the outside. So they lock the door from the outside, and they go out for pregame warm-ups. Everybody's like, where's Coach Russell? Where's Coach Russell? And so they come back to the locker room right before the game, open the door, and he goes running out the door. And he never spied on them again. And they locked him in the bathroom. But those are the stories. And again, I thought I knew them all.
Right.
And like at Dad's house here in Charlotte, he has all these pictures. He work a game on Saturday, and you go to the airport on Sunday to leave and pick up the local paper. And if there's a picture of him involved in some great play, you call the paper and buy the picture and whatever. Right. Well, he's got all these pictures of him getting yelled at. You got a great picture of Mike Shula screaming at him, and Lou Holtz and Joe Morrison down at South Carolina. I always refer to it as the wall of screaming. It's all these guys yelling at him, and a lot of times they weren't even actually yelling at him; it just looked like it. But yeah, right. but that's the part of it that it's the stories. So writing the book, hearing these stories, like I thought I knew them all, and even now it makes me mad. We'll do something like this or do a radio thing, and Dad will say, "Oh yeah." Up in Nebraska one time, I'm like, Dad, that probably should have been in the book. Yeah, so I'm still learning stories even now.
Yes. Who's the worst screamer?
Probably Chuck Amata. I think he gets the prize.
Oh yeah, I can see Chuck Amata. Yes.
Yeah, Chuck just got all over me one night at NC State, and 5 minutes later, during the TV timeout, he walks down the field and he says, "Jerry, I'm sorry. I'm Italian and I fly off the handle, but I get over it." And I said, "Well, I'm Irish. I don't." And but just a little give and take on the sideline like that. But again, I respected those coaches so much.
Yes.
Because they were pouring their heart and soul into the game and trying to make sure their kids got a great education and prepared for life and that kind of thing. So yeah, being an educator, I valued their work, and so I always got along with them pretty well.
And then what you found too was that usually if a coach flew off the handle, it didn't have anything to do with them. It was the situation. Like my favorite picture is the picture of Mike Shula screaming at Dad. Well, Mike Shula got fired about 3 weeks later. So usually there was something else going on.
Tied in.
Yeah, there was something. The stress that these coaches are under all the time. That's usually what the story was. It wasn't necessarily the lack of a pass interference call. It was the pressure of being in the ridiculously high stress job those guys were.
Yeah, and then you got yelled at, and as we know as broadcasters, sometimes we get yelled at.
Sometimes, yeah.
We're gonna come back and talk about that. I want to hold on for that. It's Ryan has to say. The Hackle Sports, the Delano Little Show. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Bay Hackle Sports, the Delano Little Show. We are here with the McGees, and Ryan, we haven't talked much about your career yet, and which is, been amazing for you. You're not only a writer, but you're doing podcasts, you're on the radio, you're doing pretty much everything, and then you got TV as well.
Yeah, when they run out of people to put on TV at ESPN, they call me and they're like, "Hey, we could use a little help." Yeah, no, I've been very fortunate, and it's been with ESPN in some way, shape, or form, my entire adult life. And again, that started with, first time I was in a press box as a kid and was like, people get paid to go to games? You figured that out a long time ago.
Yes.
They're going to pay me to go to the Hornets game this weekend?
Yes.
I think I'm going to see if I can make that work. Yeah.
Yeah. I went to the Super Bowl back in 2003 with the Panthers. Did you go?
Yeah.
And something happened at halftime of that game. And I turned around and one of my colleagues was in there. He says, "Did you see what just happened?" And I said, "What?" And he told me, and I was like, "I had my back turned. I was getting a hot dog."
Oh yeah. No.
I missed the whole thing.
Well, probably the greatest half quarter ever played in college football was Florida State, and it was a Florida State Auburn national championship game at the Rose Bowl. I was in the elevator. So that's how it works. But it beats working for a living.
It sure does.
Yeah.
It sure does. What's some of the best games you've seen that you've been to?
Well, I've covered every national championship game now. So Dad's last game was the 2009 BCS championship.
Florida, Oklahoma.
Florida, Oklahoma. It was Tebow and Sam Bradford. And I've covered all but one national championship game since then.
Wow. Okay.
And so I've been really, really fortunate. But I mean, listen, Tua on the last play of the game, Georgia and Alabama down in Atlanta. It's hard to beat that one. But yeah, but it's just fortunate. I mean, getting to go. I tell you, one of the greatest games I ever covered was the one summer I had just graduated school and was doing radio for Wingate University. We had a 61-55 game. Wingate Catawba won on a goal line stand on the last play of the game. And I always tell everybody, this is the greatest game I ever saw. And I think there was like 300 of us there that day. So yeah, but no, it's really, really fortunate. You and I were at a lot of racetracks together over the years. And obviously you think about Dale Earnhardt winning the Daytona 500, and some of those great moments, the Indy 500s that I've always been able to cover. So yeah, I mean, again, don't tell anyone. But there's checks that come to the house.
It's amazing,
and they
right?
Put me on airplanes to go to these
Yes.
things. So yeah, so don't tell anybody.
And NASCAR has been your favorite.
Yeah, well, I went to work at ESPN in the mid '90s, right when Jeff Gordon was becoming the man, and suddenly NASCAR became super cool. And ESPN was way invested in NASCAR at the time, and I was the only Southerner. Reese Davis and I were the only Southerners in the company, and Reese didn't sound Southern, and I did. And so I was from Rockingham, and I realized very quickly that there weren't a lot of people in the building that knew that much about NASCAR in Connecticut. And so and it got me moved back to North Carolina after a couple of years, and I went to the racetrack almost exclusively for years and years and years. And it's I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, but getting to mix it up a little bit with some football and baseball and whatever else, that's good too.
Yeah, Jeff Gordon was here at the restaurant just a couple of days ago, and he's truly one of the great ambassadors for the sport. And like you said before, he kind of changed NASCAR, kind of similar way that Tiger Woods changed golf.
It's transformative. I mean, he made it cool. When you had, it was Dale Earnhardt and Rusty Wallace's world, right? But then when Jeff Gordon came along, and he and I are almost exactly the same age. In fact, the night he retired, his last full-time race,
right?
He almost won a championship that night. And I was interviewing him for SportsCenter. As soon as the interview was over, I go, "Hey, dude, don't retire." Because I said, as soon as you retire, I become like the old guy, in the media center, right? I was like, so please stick around. But he made the sport cool to an entirely different demographic, an entirely different region of the country. And I always tell everybody that everybody had really nice cars before Jeff Gordon got there. And by the time he retired, all the racers had airplanes. I mean, it completely changed everything. Yep.
Where do you go from here? Do you have any other things planned?
Yeah, I mean, from here, we still do Marty McGee on SEC Network and ESPN Radio every Saturday morning. We'll take it on the road this fall. And it's, you know the deal, man. You get about halfway through the summer and then it's full on college football.
Absolutely.
And again, my love for college football started, standing on the sideline when I was a kid. And knock on wood, they still pay me to go to games, and it's but college football, as you know, it's greatest sport in the world as far as I'm concerned. And so to get to cover it now on a full-time basis is pretty great.
Dr. McGee, what are you doing? Are you enjoying somewhat of retirement? Or
he's terrible at it. He's terrible at being retired.
I might be the worst retiree you've ever been.
Awful, yeah.
But I will tell you, when COVID came, and one day I had 5 college presidents call me in one day, pouring their hearts out. We can't have graduation. We can't recruit a freshman class. Our fundraisers can't be on the road. We're trying to teach remotely. And I told my wife that night, I think retirement's going to work out. Because pre-COVID, I wasn't a good retiree. After COVID, I become a much better retiree.
I got you.
But just like in football officiating, when you retire from your real job, you miss the people. The people that you've been working alongside for 23 years and been part of the struggle with you. You know their families, they know your families, they know the good parts of your life and the difficult parts of your life, and they become such a part of the fabric of your life, and suddenly you don't see them anymore. And that's really, really hard to adjust to. And don't miss the travel, don't miss a lot of the complaints, but I do miss the people.
Yeah. Dr. McGee, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Ryan, a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Thank you guys
Great to see you.
for joining us and sharing with us some of your experiences. And it's been fun. I think I'm not going to say you're better than the Shells. I'm going to say you guys were exactly equal.
Yeah, all right, we'll take that.
Hey,
Yeah,
fantastic job.
I'll take that. Yeah.
Guys, thank you very much. That's all the time we have for Big Heckle Sports, the Delano Little Show. Hope to see you again soon.